I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story like this. I guess it's just one of those things that happens to someone else, right? But here I am, sitting in front of my computer screen, ready to spill the details of my life that took a horrific turn. My name is Jake, and I was married to a woman named Lisa for nearly 10 years. I thought we had a good life together. We had a cozy little home in the suburbs, a steady routine, and friends who I thought I could trust. It all started to unravel when I visited an old childhood friend, Mark, who was battling cancer in hospice. Mark and I grew up together. We were inseparable as kids, and I had been trying to support him through his illness as best as I could. But as I walked into that sterile room filled with the smell of antiseptic and the distant sounds of hospital machinery, I had no idea that my life was about to change forever. Mark looked frail, but his spirit was still there, his trademark smirk breaking through the pain. We talked about old times, shared a few laughs, and I tried to forget about the reality of his condition. While I was there, I noticed a stack of envelopes on the bedside table. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I thought nothing of it initially, assuming they were cards from family or get-well wishes from friends. But when I picked them up, I noticed one particular envelope addressed in a familiar handwriting. It was Lisa's. I was taken aback. My heart raced as I opened it. Inside, I found a love letter that was supposed to be private. I stood there frozen, the words on the page blurring together as I processed what I was reading. It was a confession of love, filled with promises and intimate details that should never have been written to anyone but me. My mind raced back to the little changes I had noticed, her late nights at work, her sudden interest in gym sessions, the way she talked about Mark like he was a lifeline rather than a friend. In that moment, the world around me fell away. I was standing in a hospice room with my dying friend, and my wife was betraying me with him. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my gut. How could she do this to me? I thought we were in love. I thought we had something real. Mark must have seen the change in my expression as I stood there with the letter in hand. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, cutting him off. I didn't need to hear any excuses or justifications. I left the room, my heart pounding, feeling like I was suffocating. I stumbled to my car, tears blurring my vision, and I drove home in a daze. When I got home, I found Lisa in the living room, flipping through a magazine like everything was normal. I felt rage bubbling inside me, but I also felt that deep, hollow ache of betrayal. I confronted her, holding up the letter like a dagger. The look on her face shifted from confusion to guilt in an instant. "Jake, it's not what you think," she exclaimed, her voice rising in panic. But I didn't want her excuses. I wanted answers. I wanted her to understand the depth of her betrayal. She started talking fast, spinning a web of lies that made my head spin. It was a mistake. I was lonely. You were always busy. But none of that mattered. The emotional turmoil was crashing over me like waves, and I couldn't focus on her words. I was drowning in anger, confusion, and heartbreak. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make her feel an ounce of the pain she inflicted on me. Instead, I felt a deep sadness settling in my bones. It felt like the world I knew was crumbling around me, and I didn't know how to stop it. In that moment, I realized I needed to think clearly before making a decision. I walked out, leaving Lisa in the living room, lost in a whirlwind of emotions. I had to gather my thoughts and figure out what to do next. I spent the night at Mark's hospice room, talking to him and sharing my heartbreak. He listened patiently, offering his own perspective. I couldn't let Lisa's betrayal define me, but I needed to figure out how I'd move forward from this twisted reality. I had a decision to make. The night dragged on as I sat in Mark's room, the fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow around us. I could hear the soft beeping of the machines and the faint sounds of other patients in the distance. I felt a strange camaraderie with my friend. Here we were, two men caught in the throes of life, one fighting against a battle he could hardly win and the other grappling with an equally devastating emotional betrayal. As I recounted the details of my confrontation with Lisa, Mark listened intently, his eyes filled with a mix of sympathy and understanding. "Jake, I know this is hard for you," he said softly. "But you have to think about what you want. You don't deserve to be treated like this." He was right. I didn't deserve to be treated like that. Lisa's betrayal was a brutal blow, but it also opened my eyes to the reality of our relationship. I had been so wrapped up in my life, my work, and the normalcy of our marriage that I had neglected to see the cracks forming in our foundation. There had been signs of trouble, and I had chosen to ignore them. The next day, I took a step back to assess everything. I drove home, the sunlight filtering through the trees lining our street, casting shadows on the pavement. I was met with an eerie sense of normalcy when I walked into our house. The smell of breakfast wafted through the air, but my stomach churned at the thought of sitting down to eat with the woman who had shattered my trust. Lisa was in the kitchen, scrambling eggs with a smile on her face as if nothing had happened. I could feel the tension radiating off me as I entered the room. I wanted to confront her again to demand answers, but I realized I needed to approach this with a clearer head. "Can we talk?" I finally managed to say, my voice steady despite the turmoil within me. "Of course, Jake," she replied, her tone light, but I could see a flicker of concern in her eyes. She set the spatula down and turned to face me, leaning against the counter. "I found your letters," I said bluntly, watching her expression fall. It was as if a cloud passed over the sun. "What the hell were you thinking?" Her eyes widened in disbelief, and I could see the gears turning in her mind as she scrambled for response. "I told you it wasn't what you think. Mark is sick. I was just trying to be there for him." "Be there for him?" I interrupted. "By writing love letters, by sleeping with him, you call that being there for him?" Her defenses went up and she started to argue, but I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore. I felt like I was losing my grip on the situation and I had to regain some control. "No more lies, Lisa. Just tell me what's going on. Why did you do this?" She hesitated, looking away for a moment before finally meeting my gaze. "I was lonely, Jake. You've been so busy with work and Mark was there. He understood me. I didn't mean for it to happen." Loneliness. That word hung in the air between us like a heavy fog. I thought about the times I'd come home late, lost in my own world, focusing on deadlines and projects. Had I really neglected her that much? But that still didn't justify her actions. "Do you love him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, and in that moment I saw her true colors. "I don't know, maybe I had feelings for him, but it wasn't serious. You're my husband, I love you." But did she? Her words felt hollow, and I had to fight against the instinct to believe her. I had to protect myself from the pain of denial. "Lisa, I don't think I can do this anymore," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't think I can trust you again." Her face fell, and I could see the desperation in her eyes. "Please, Jake, don't say that. We can work this out." But I wasn't sure we could. The emotional impact of her betrayal was hitting me hard. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me, and beneath that sadness was a deep anger. The trust that once held us together had been shattered, and I couldn't just glue it back together with empty promises or apologies. I left the kitchen, needing space to think. I wandered into the living room, the silence feeling deafening. I sat on the couch, my mind racing. I thought about my life moving forward. Could I ever forgive her? Could I ever look at her the same way again? The answer was becoming clearer. I needed to take time for myself to figure out what I truly wanted. I couldn't make a rash decision in the heat of the moment, but I also knew I couldn't stay in a marriage built on betrayal. As the day wore on, I began to think about my options. I had to weigh the possibility of separation against the pain of staying in a broken relationship. I needed to reclaim my life, and that meant confronting the reality of our situation. I decided to take a step back from our relationship, to give myself room to breathe and think. I couldn't let Lisa's actions dictate my future. I had to find a way to heal, to regain my sense of self. I was determined to move forward, no matter how painful that journey might be. In the days that followed, I found myself lost in a whirlwind of emotions. I stayed in a state of semi-avoidance, both from Lisa and from the reality of our situation. I began sleeping on the couch, a physical barrier between us that echoed the emotional distance I felt. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt like a cold prison, each room a reminder of betrayal. At work, I struggled to focus. My coworkers noticed my distracted demeanor and asked if I was okay, but I brushed off their concerns. I couldn't talk about what was happening at home. It felt too raw, too painful. The world outside continued to move on while I was trapped in a moment of despair. I spent most of my evenings at Mark's hospice, needing that familiar connection, a sense of grounding. Talking to him became a refuge, a place where I could let my guard down and share my pain without judgment. He had a way of listening that made it easier to process everything swirling inside me. "You don't have to decide everything now, Jake," he said one night as we sat together, the soft light from the bedside lamp illuminating his gaunt face. "Take your time, figure out your next steps." But back at home, Lisa was desperate to reconnect, often trying to engage me in conversations about our lives, our future. Each time she reached out, I felt a mixture of anger and sadness. I would respond with short, clipped answers, not wanting to drag out conversations that felt pointless. The emotional weight of her betrayal still loomed large, and every interaction was a reminder of the trust she had shattered. One evening, after yet another strained dinner where the silence felt suffocating, Lisa finally broke down. "I can't keep doing this, Jake. I need to know where we stand." Her voice trembled and I could see tears welling up in her eyes. "Where we stand?" I echoed, incredulous. "You know where we stand. You're the one who dug this hole." She stepped back, hurt flashing across her face. "I know I messed up, but I want to change. I want to make this work." But could I believe her? I was caught in a storm of conflicting feelings. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to reassure her that everything would be okay, but the larger part of me was screaming that this was unacceptable. I needed to protect myself, but it was hard to reconcile the love I had for her with the betrayal I felt. "Lisa, I can't promise anything right now. I need time to think," I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "You've hurt me in a way I never thought possible. I can't just gloss over it." Her shoulders slumped and she turned away, the weight of regret pressing down on her. I felt a pang of guilt, but I quickly pushed it aside. I had to focus on myself, to untangle the mess of emotions and remember my worth. After a week of sleepless nights and perpetual uncertainty, I decided it was time to reach out to someone who had been through something similar. I called my sister, Sarah. She had gone through a tough divorce a few years back, and I needed her perspective. When I arrived at her place, she greeted me with an understanding hug, her warmth enveloping me like a shield. "I'm so sorry you're going through this, Jake," she said softly as we settled down in her living room. "Talk to me about it." As I poured out my heart, Sarah listened intently, nodding as I recounted the details of Lisa's affair, my discovery, and the emotional fallout. "You deserve better, you know that, right?" she said gently. "You're a good man and you shouldn't have to settle for someone who doesn't value you." Her words resonated deeply. I had been feeling so lost in the chaos that I had forgotten my own worth. I didn't have to accept being treated like a second choice. I needed to reclaim my life and decide what I wanted for my future. "Do you think I should confront Mark?" I asked, a wave of uncertainty washing over me. "I mean, he's my friend, but he's also part of this mess." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "If you feel it would help you find closure, then yes. But be prepared for whatever comes next. This isn't just about you and Lisa. It also involves your friendship with him." I spent the next few days contemplating that conversation. I didn't want to confront Mark with anger, but rather to understand his side of the story. I needed clarity, and part of that meant facing the man who had betrayed our friendship in the most intimate way. When I finally gathered the courage to visit Mark again, I found him weaker than before, but with that same glimmer of spirit I had always admired. I took a seat beside him, the weight of the unspoken tension filling the room. "Hey man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we talk?" "Of course, Jake, what's on your mind?" he asked, his expression earnest. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I found out about you and Lisa." The moment hung in the air, charged and heavy. Mark's face blanched and he looked away for a moment, visibly processing the enormity of what I had just said. I I never meant for you to find out like this," he finally replied, his voice shaky. "Then how did it happen?" I pressed, my heart racing. "Why her? Why did you think it was okay?" Mark struggled to meet my gaze, his eyes flickering with shame. "It just happened, man. I was in a dark place and Lisa was there for me. I thought we were just leaning on each other." "Leaning on each other?" I interrupted, the anger bubbling back up. "You were sleeping together. This isn't just some emotional affair. This was a betrayal of everything we built as friends. He winced, and I could see the guilt swirling in his eyes. I know, and I hate myself for it. I didn't want to hurt you. It was never supposed to go that far. I felt my chest tighten, torn between the anger I wanted to unleash and the sorrow that threatened to consume me. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted to hold on to the friendship we'd built over the years. Mark, I said, my voice calmer now, I need to know how you feel about her. Do you love her? He hesitated again, and the silence felt like an eternity. Honestly, I don't know. I care about her, but I never wanted it to turn into this. I'm sick, and I guess I just wanted something to hold on to, even if it was wrong. I absorbed his words, the weight of it all crashing down on me. This was more complicated than I wanted it to be. I had to make a choice about my future, and that meant deciding whether I could ever forgive him, let alone her. As I left that conversation, I felt a mix of relief and devastation. I had confronted the situation head-on, and while it didn't bring me the closure I was hoping for, it did clear some of the fog. I realized I had to focus on my journey to healing, regardless of what happened between Mark and Lisa. It was time to reclaim my narrative, to decide what I wanted moving forward. I felt a burning determination rising within me. I wouldn't let this define who I was or how I would move forward. I would take the lessons learned from this heartbreak and use them to rebuild my life, stronger than before. After that difficult conversation with Mark, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. I knew the path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was a necessary step in my journey toward healing. I couldn't let anger and hurt dictate my next moves. I had to focus on what would ultimately be best for me. I returned home that evening feeling a little lighter, yet still burdened by the heavy weight of my marriage. Lisa was waiting for me, her eyes searching mine as if she hoped to read my thoughts. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her. She was hurting too, but it didn't erase the pain she had caused. I was torn between the part of me that still cared for her and the part that wanted to protect myself from further heartbreak. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit down on the couch. I took a seat opposite her and waited for her to gather her thoughts. It felt like we were on opposite sides of a battlefield, and every word felt like a potential weapon. "Sorry for everything," she began, her voice lacking its usual bravado. "I didn't think it would go this far. It was a huge mistake, and I hate myself for hurting you." I wanted to believe her, but the sting of betrayal was still fresh. "Do you love him?" I asked, my voice steady but the question laden with emotion. "No, no, I don't," she replied, her urgency escalating. "It was a stupid mistake. I was lonely and it just happened. I never meant for it to get so out of hand." Her eyes were wide with desperation, and I could see the fear of losing me etched across her face. "I want to make this work, Jake. I want to fix this. I love you." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. I wanted to scream that love didn't erase betrayal, that it didn't magically fix everything. "Love isn't enough, Lisa," I said firmly. "You broke my trust in a way that can't be easily mended. You went behind my back with my friend." Her face twisted in anguish, and it was hard for me to see her like this. I still cared for her, but the hurt overshadowed those feelings. "I'm willing to do anything to prove I can change. Please, give me a chance," she pleaded. I found myself grappling with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to give her that chance, to believe that we could move past this. But the other part of me knew that the road to rebuilding something after such a betrayal was filled with pain and uncertainty. "I need time to think," I finally said, feeling the weight of the decision settle heavily on my shoulders. "I can't promise you anything right now. I need to focus on myself." The look of heartbreak on her face was gut-wrenching, and I hated that I had to put her through this. But I couldn't ignore my own feelings, my own needs. I needed to heal, and that meant taking a step back. In the following days, I threw myself into my work and leaned on my sister for support, seeking solace in our conversations. Sarah encouraged me to think of what I truly wanted and to prioritize my own well-being. "You can't fix someone else if you're broken yourself, Jake," she reminded me. "Focus on healing first. You'll know what to do when the time comes." As I navigated the emotional roller coaster, I also took time to reflect on my life outside of Lisa. I rekindled hobbies that I had put aside during my marriage, picking up my guitar and playing music again. I found solace in the notes that flowed from my fingers, letting the melodies express the pain I couldn't articulate in words. Yet the moments of clarity were often punctuated by memories of what I had lost, the shared laughter, the intimacy, and the love that had once flourished between us. I missed that connection, but reality reminded me that it was now tainted by betrayal. One evening, after another long day at work, I came home to find Lisa sitting at the dining table waiting for me. The air was thick with tension, and I felt an internal struggle rising as I faced her. "Jake, can we please talk?" she asked, her voice softer than before. I hesitated, but something in her tone made me nod. I took a seat across from her, bracing myself for what was to come. "Things can't go on like this," she began, her eyes pleading. "I miss you, and I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. I want to go to couples therapy. I think it could help us work through our issues." The suggestion caught me off guard. Couples therapy felt like a last resort, a way to salvage what was left of our marriage, and yet I couldn't help but consider it. "Do you really think that's what we need?" I asked, skepticism creeping into my voice. "I know it sounds corny," she replied quickly, "but I believe we can rebuild what we had. I just need you to meet me halfway. I love you, Jake, and I don't want to lose you." Her honesty hit me hard. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but the reality of our situation still loomed large. I thought about my emotional well-being, the pain I had endured, and the possibility of a future free of betrayal. "I'm not sure about therapy," I admitted, feeling the heaviness of the moment. "I need more time to decide if this is something we can truly work on." Lisa nodded, her expression reflective. "I understand. I'll give you the space you need. Just know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right." As I left the table, I felt a mix of uncertainty and hope. Perhaps therapy could provide the structure we needed to work through the pain, but I was still hesitant. I had to prioritize my healing before making any major decisions about our future. That night, I lay in bed with my thoughts racing. I knew that whatever I chose to do, it had to come from a place of self-love and protection. It was time to reclaim my narrative and decide what the next chapter of my life would look like, whether that involved Lisa or not. The days turned into weeks, and I found myself in a constant cycle of reflection and uncertainty. I still hadn't made up my mind about therapy, but Lisa's willingness to work on our issues left a glimmer of hope. I continued to wrestle with the emotional fallout of her betrayal while trying to rebuild my sense of self. I picked up extra shifts at work to keep my mind occupied, pouring my energy into projects that allowed me to escape from the chaos at home. Every day, I looked for signs that could guide my decision. I wasn't ready to fully forgive Lisa, nor was I sure that I could ever trust her again, but the thought of losing everything we had built together was also unsettling. It was a strange dichotomy. I missed the good times we shared, but couldn't ignore the pain she had caused. One chilly evening, Sarah invited me over for dinner. I accepted her invitation, needing a distraction from the emotional whirlwind. As we sat around the dinner table, enjoying comfort food and sharing stories, I felt a sense of normalcy I had missed for so long. "Have you thought more about Lisa and the therapy idea?" Sarah asked, her tone gentle but probing. "I'm really torn," I confessed, shoving a forkful of mashed potatoes into my mouth to buy time. "Part of me thinks it could help, but I also feel like it's a bit too soon. I don't know if I can get past the betrayal." "Jake, it's okay to feel like that. You're processing a lot," she said. "Just remember that therapy isn't just about fixing the relationship. It's also about helping you heal. You should consider what's best for you." Her words resonated deeply. I had been so focused on the idea of repairing our marriage that I had neglected my own healing journey. I needed to remember that I was entitled to my feelings and that prioritizing myself didn't make me a selfish person. After the dinner, I returned home to find Lisa sitting in the living room, waiting for me. The sight of her made my heart race, but I steeled myself for whatever conversation was about to unfold. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began, her voice tentative. "I know it's been hard for both of us, but I genuinely want to work through this together." I took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of the moment. I'm still processing everything, Lisa. I need you to understand that. It's not easy for me, and I'm not ready to just jump back into things like they were before. I get that, she replied, her gaze earnest. But I'm willing to do the work. I want to go to therapy. I think it could help us understand each other better. I considered her request. Therapy could provide a safe space to discuss our feelings, to explore the underlying issues in our marriage without the fear of judgment. I knew I needed to face my own pain and insecurities if I wanted to move forward, whether that was with Lisa or without her. Okay, I finally said, my heart racing at the thought of what I was committing to. Let's give it a try. But I need to be clear, this isn't just about saving our marriage. I need to heal too. Her eyes lit up with hope, but I could see the apprehension lingering beneath the surface. Thank you, Jake. I'll do my best to show you that I can be better. We scheduled our first session for the following week, and I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. As the day approached, I allowed myself to consider the possibilities. Maybe therapy could help us rebuild the foundation of trust that had crumbled beneath us. At our first session, we sat in a small, cozy room filled with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. The therapist, Dr. Evans, welcomed us warmly, creating an inviting atmosphere that soothed some of the tension between us. Thank you both for being here, Dr. Evans began. This is a safe space for both of you to express your feelings and work through the pain together. Let's start by discussing what brought you here today. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I glanced at Lisa, who looked equally anxious. I knew that sharing our experiences wouldn't be easy, but I also recognized the importance of being open. Lisa spoke first, recounting her feelings of loneliness and her need for emotional connection. I didn't handle it well, and I made a huge mistake. She admitted, her voice shaking. I hurt the person I love the most. I could feel the weight of her words, but I also felt compelled to share my side. I think I got so comfortable in our routine that I didn't realize we were drifting apart. I focused too much on work and not enough on us. But that doesn't excuse what you did, Lisa. As the session progressed, we opened up about our fears and insecurities, delving into the depths of our relationship. I felt raw and exposed, but somehow it was liberating. The more we talked, the more I could see the cracks in our relationship, but I also began to understand the potential for growth. The weeks rolled on, and we continued to attend therapy sessions. Each time, I felt a mix of discomfort and relief. We both worked hard to communicate our feelings, discovering hidden layers in our relationship that had been buried for far too long. And while the pain of betrayal was still fresh, I started to see glimpses of hope. Lisa was genuinely trying to change, and I was beginning to regain some of the trust that had been shattered. I realized that working on our marriage didn't mean I had to abandon my own healing journey. But just as things started to settle slightly, I received a phone call that would shake the ground beneath me once again. Mark's condition had worsened, and he was being moved to palliative care. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't been ready for this, not now. I felt an overwhelming wave of guilt wash over me. Here I was, starting to heal and reconnect with my wife while my friend was facing the end of his life. I had supported him through his battle, but now I felt like I was being pulled in two different directions. I knew I had to go see him. I needed to be there for Mark, not just as a friend, but as a way to find closure for everything that had happened between us. I told Lisa about my plan, and while she understood, I could see the worry in her eyes. "Just be careful, Jake," she said softly. "I don't want you to get hurt again." I promised her I would be careful, but I could shake the feeling that this would be the final chapter of our friendship. As I drove to the hospice, I felt a mix of anxiety and sadness, unsure of what I would say when I saw him again. Would I confront him about the affair, or would I focus on being there for him in his last moments? The answers lay ahead, waiting for me at the hospice, where everything would come full circle. As I approached the hospice, my heart raced with conflicting emotions. I felt a heavy weight in my chest as I parked my car and made my way inside. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, and I was met with the familiar sounds of machines humming and distant conversations. I walked down the hallway, my stomach churning with anxiety. When I reached Mark's room, I found him lying on the bed, looking frail and weak. He was surrounded by family, but his eyes lit up when he saw me enter. "Jake," he managed to say, a smile breaking through the pain etched on his face. "Hey man," I replied, forcing a smile despite the lump in my throat. I approached the bed and took a seat next to him, trying to ignore the buzzing thoughts in my head. I felt a wave of emotions crashing over me, guilt, anger, sadness, but I also felt the need to be there for him, to support him in this heartbreaking moment. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I needed to see you," I admitted. "I wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" Mark sighed, the weight of his illness evident in his eyes. "I'm tired, man. I fought hard, but I think it's time to let go." He paused, and I could see the conflict in his gaze. "I'm really sorry about everything, Jake. I never wanted to hurt you." Hearing him say that felt like a double-edged sword. I wanted to be angry, to let him know how deeply he had betrayed me, but at that moment I pushed those feelings aside. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied, my voice steady. "It's been a tough road for me, but I also understand that you were in a dark place." Mark nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I messed up and I didn't think about the consequences. I wish I could take it back. I was just so scared of dying that I wanted to feel alive, you know." His words resonated with me, and I realized that beneath the betrayal there was a fierce vulnerability. "We all make mistakes, Mark. It's human," I said softly. "But it's important to own them. You can't change the past, but you can find peace moving forward." He looked at me, a mixture of gratitude and sorrow in his eyes. "Thank you, Jake. I'm glad you're here. You deserve happiness no matter what happens." In that moment I felt a shift within me. I was no longer just a victim of betrayal. I was a man who had the power to forgive, not for Mark's sake but for my own. I didn't want to carry that weight of anger and resentment any longer. "I hope you find peace too," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "We can't change what happened between us, but I want you to know that I'm not holding onto that anger anymore." We sat in silence for a moment, each lost in our thoughts. Gravity of the situation hung heavily in the air, but I felt lighter. I was reclaiming my narrative, letting go of the toxic emotions that had consumed me for too long. Eventually, Mark's family started to say their goodbyes, and I knew it was almost time for me to leave. I took a deep breath, knowing that this was my last chance to say what I felt. "Mark, I hope you know that I'll remember the good times we had. You were a great friend to me, and I'll always cherish those memories." He smiled weakly, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you for that, Jake. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you and Lisa can find it in your hearts to move forward." As I stood to leave, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had faced my demons and in the process found a sense of peace I hadn't expected. I had come to terms with the betrayal, not just from Lisa but from Mark as well. I was ready to face the future, whatever it might hold. When I returned home that evening, I found Lisa waiting for me. She looked up, her expression anxious but hopeful. "How was he?" I took a moment to gather my thoughts. "He's struggling, but we had a good conversation. I think I finally found some closure." "Jake, I'm glad to hear that," she said, her eyes reflecting genuine relief. "How are you feeling?" I hesitated, considering the journey I had been on. "I've realized that I can't hold on to the anger anymore. I have to focus on my own healing and what I want moving forward." As I spoke, I could see a flicker of hope in her eyes. "So, what does that mean for us?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my decision. "I think we need to continue with therapy to work through our issues together. I'm not ready to give up on us entirely, but I need to see real change. We both have to put in the effort." Her face broke into a tentative smile. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Jake. I want to show you that I can be the partner you deserve." As we stood there, I felt a renewed sense of hope. It wouldn't be easy, and there would still be challenges ahead, but I was willing to try. I was reclaiming my life and allowing room for healing and growth. I had learned that forgiveness was a powerful tool, one that set me free rather than binding me in chains of resentment. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that whatever path I chose, I was ready to face it head on. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace.